When I collapsed at work, the doctors called my family. No one came. I remember the sound of the monitors, a steady reminder that I was still here, even if no one else seemed to care. My fingers trembled as I reached for my phone, hoping to see a missed call, a text, something. Instead, what I saw nearly stopped my heart for good. My daughter's smiling face filled the screen, surrounded by my other children, captioned with 7 words that would echo in my mind for days. Family day without the drama. In that instant, the oxygen in the room seemed to vanish. I wasn't just fighting for air, I was fighting to understand how the people I gave my entire life to could erase me so easily. But one thought anchored me. If I ever walked out of that hospital alive, I'd make sure they understood what family truly means. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoy true stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too. For 30 years, I carried my family on my back. I worked doubles, skipped vacations, and paid for every mistake my children made quietly. I was the one who stayed up late filling out college forms, the one who borrowed money from coworkers so the lights would stay on, the one who ate leftovers while my kids got the last piece of chicken. I told myself it was worth it, because that's what mothers do, we give, until there's nothing left to give. I missed birthdays, doctor appointments, and my own rest days just to make sure they never lacked anything. I thought love meant carrying everyone else's weight without expecting gratitude. My hands were always tired, but my heart stayed open. Yet with every passing year, the distance between us grew. My calls became interruptions, my messages unanswered, and my voice something they only heard when they needed money or advice. My daughter used to wait for me at the window when she was little, waving the moment she saw my car turn the corner. Now, when I called, she would sigh and say, "Mom, stop being so dramatic, it's just life." She had a way of making me feel like my care was an inconvenience. My son, who once begged for bedtime stories, now texted once a week with a simple, "busy." I watched the family I built with sleepless nights and sacrifice drift away, and I couldn't understand why love felt so one-sided. I told myself it was a phase, that maybe they were just growing up. But deep down, I knew something had changed, not just in them, but in how they saw me. I wasn't their mother anymore. I was their safety net, something to fall on, not someone to stand beside. There were evenings when I'd come home from work, still in uniform, too tired to take off my shoes. The dinner table would be empty, the house would echo. I'd scroll through my phone, hoping to see a message from one of them, but the silence was louder than any notification. Sometimes I'd open their old photos, remembering the laughter that used to fill our home, wondering when it all stopped feeling like family. Every morning I'd wake up, push the pain down, and go to work again, convincing myself that maybe tomorrow would be different. But tomorrow always looked the same, them living their lives as if I no longer existed. Still, I kept giving. I paid my daughter's tuition when she dropped out and tried again. I helped my son start his small business even when I didn't have enough for my own bills. I believed that if I just kept showing up, eventually they'd see how much I loved them. But love doesn't always translate into loyalty. Sometimes it turns into expectation and then entitlement. They stopped saying thank you long before I stopped giving. I told myself that mothers don't give up, that one day they'd come back and see me not as a burden, but as the reason they made it through. I clung to that hope like oxygen, not knowing that holding on was slowly suffocating me. I thought my sacrifices would bring us closer. I was wrong. They said they were busy, but somehow they were always together. Without me, every holiday became a reminder of that truth. Thanksgiving used to be my favorite time of year, the smell of pie baking, the laughter echoing through the kitchen. But now, it was just me, a single plate of reheated leftovers, and a phone that never rang. I'd scroll through social media, pretending I was just checking the news, but I always ended up on my daughter's page. There she was, smiling with her brother, their arms wrapped around each other, the caption reading, "Family is everything." Family. The word burned a hole in my chest. I wanted to comment, to remind them I was still here, but I didn't. I just watched. As if by staring long enough, I could find my place somewhere in those pictures again. Birthdays came and went. Mine especially. There was a time they'd fight over who would bake me a cake or write the card. Now, it was silence. No call, No message. I'd tell myself maybe they'd surprise me later in the day. I'd keep my phone charged, volume turned up, waiting for a sound that never came. By midnight, the only light in the room came from my screen, reflecting the one notification I didn't want, a memory from years ago of the three of us smiling at a party. That was the kind of cruelty technology offered. It let you relive what you'd already lost. There was one Sunday morning when I tried to call my daughter. I rehearsed what I'd say, wanting to sound cheerful, not desperate. She answered after the third ring, her voice rushed and distracted. "Mom, I'm headed out. Can I call you later?" she said, though we both knew she wouldn't. Hours later, she posted a photo of herself at brunch, her and her friends clinking glasses. The caption, "Good vibes only." I looked at that phrase for a long time. Somewhere along the way, my presence had stopped being a good vibe. I didn't know what I had done to deserve that, but I carried the blame like it was mine to bear. Eventually, her posts changed tone. They weren't just about happiness anymore. They started to sound pointed, like quiet attacks hidden behind cheerful words. "Some people drain your peace, even if they gave you life," one read. Another, "Cutting off toxic energy is self-care." My chest tightened reading them. Toxic, the word clung to me for days. I asked myself if that's how she saw me, a burden, an energy to cut off. I replayed every conversation, every moment I might have sounded too worried, too protective, too motherly. Was I the problem? Had my love turned into something they resented? I couldn't find the answer, and that uncertainty became my quiet torture. I started moving through days in silence, filling my time with meaningless chores. I worked longer hours, stayed later at the office, just so I wouldn't have to come home to the emptiness. My coworkers would talk about family dinners, their children calling to check in. I'd smile politely and nod, pretending mine did the same. But inside, I knew I had become the forgotten one, the parent who existed only when needed. My sacrifices had become invisible. My love turned into background noise. It's a strange thing, watching your family live as if you never existed, knowing you gave them the very life they're using to ignore you. I think the part that hurt most wasn't their absence, it was their ease in forgetting me. They didn't hesitate, they didn't stumble. They just moved on, as if I was a chapter they had already finished reading. And I tried to convince myself I was okay with it, that maybe this was what getting older meant, fading quietly while the world you built kept spinning without you. But deep down, I was breaking in ways I didn't show. I smiled when people asked how my kids were and said, "They're doing great," because it was easier than admitting I didn't really know. Then came that morning. I remember feeling dizzy, a strange numbness creeping through my body as I tried to reach for my phone. My hand slipped, the screen lighting up briefly with my daughter's smiling face from a wallpaper photo taken years ago. The last thing I thought before I fell was how far apart we'd drifted and how badly I wanted them to remember me, even if it was too late. The day I collapsed, I finally got their attention, but not in the way I expected. It happened on a Thursday, the kind of day that feels ordinary until it becomes unforgettable. The office was buzzing with noise, phones ringing, keyboards clattering, the sound of heels against linoleum floors. I'd been working since sunrise, skipping breakfast again, sipping coffee that had long gone cold. There was a meeting scheduled for noon, and as usual, I was the one holding everything together. I remember standing up to grab a file when the room tilted slightly. At first, I thought it was just fatigue. I'd had those dizzy spells before. But then, my vision started to blur. The sound of my coworkers faded into a dull echo. My hand reached for the desk, but it slipped, scattering papers like white birds taking flight. And then, nothing. The floor came up faster than I expected. A sharp pain, then a cold, spreading silence. My head hit the carpet, and everything around me dimmed into muffled voices and footsteps rushing closer. "She's not breathing right," someone shouted. "Call 911, another voice trembled. As they gathered around, their faces blurred, worried, panicked, but not familiar. Strangers who knew me by job title, not by name. They pressed their hands on my shoulder, asking if I could hear them, but I couldn't form the words. My body felt heavy, like it had been carrying years of unshed tears and unspoken pain, and now it had finally decided to rest without asking my permission. My body gave out before my spirit did. They said it was exhaustion. I call it heartbreak. The paramedics came quickly. I could feel their hands lifting me onto the stretcher, hear the faint click of medical equipment, the steady rhythm of their urgency. Someone asked for my emergency contact. I wanted to speak to tell them my daughter's name, my son's number, but even if I could, I wondered if they'd answer. Inside the ambulance, I drifted in and out of consciousness. The siren wailed above me, a lonely sound that seemed to echo everything I felt inside. The medic beside me kept saying, "Stay with us, ma'am, you're going to be okay." But the truth was, I didn't know what okay meant anymore. For years, I had lived in survival mode, working, providing, enduring, all while hoping love would someday circle back to me. But as I lay there, hearing the world rush past through the ambulance siren, I realized how little I'd saved for myself. My body had become an empty shell, running on duty instead of joy. At the hospital, the lights were harsh and sterile. Doctors' voices blurred together, words like dehydration, collapse, severe fatigue, stress overload. They said I was lucky to have survived. Lucky. That word made me want to laugh and cry at once. What kind of luck is it to wake up and realize no one noticed you were gone? The nurse adjusted the IV in my arm and smiled gently. "We tried calling your family," she said. "No answer yet. Maybe they're on their way." I nodded, pretending to believe her, but deep inside, I knew the truth. If they hadn't shown up for dinners, birthdays, or tears, why would they rush now? Hours passed. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking the emptiness beside my bed. My phone sat on the nightstand, silent. No missed calls, no messages. Only the steady beep of the heart monitor, reminding me I was still here, still waiting. As the night deepened, I turned my head toward the window. Raindrops tapped against the glass like tiny knocks from heaven. I closed my eyes and whispered, "So, this is what it takes to stop, to finally be noticed." But what hurt most wasn't the fall, it was realizing no one cared enough to pick me up. The first night passed quietly, though sleep never came. The room smelled of antiseptic and sorrow, and the dim lights above cast long shadows that crawled across the wall like restless ghosts. Every hour or so, the monitor beside my bed beeped, reminding me that my heart somehow still had the strength to keep going. I stared at the ceiling, tracing cracks I hadn't noticed before, counting the seconds between the nurse's footsteps in the hallway. Each one echoed the same unanswered question pulsing through my chest. Where are they? Morning came with the same sterile brightness, the same ticking clock, the same untouched chair by my bedside. The nurse entered quietly, her shoes barely making a sound on the linoleum floor. She smiled, that kind of professional kindness that doesn't ask questions, and checked the IV, scribbling notes on her clipboard. I waited until she looked up before whispering, "Did anyone call?" Her eyes softened, but her head shook. "Not yet," she said gently, almost like she was apologizing for them. Then she added, "Sometimes families need a little time to process things." I wanted to believe that. I really did. Maybe my daughter had work. Maybe my son hadn't gotten the message. Maybe they thought I'd be fine, like always. After all, I was the strong one, the dependable one, the one who never broke. But this time, I had. And no one noticed. The days started blending into one another, morning, evening, night. Nurses came and went, kind strangers who knew my vitals better than my children knew my voice. The walls began to feel closer, the air heavier. Every buzz of my phone made my pulse quicken, only for it to fade into disappointment when it turned out to be nothing but spam emails or hospital reminders. The doctor came in on the third morning, cheerful but detached. "Your recovery's going well," he said. "We're just keeping you for observation." I nodded, but my eyes stayed on the door behind him, hoping someone familiar might walk through it. No one did. By the fourth day, the silence became a presence of its own, thick, patient, merciless. The nurse offered to turn on the television, but I declined. The noise felt wrong in a place so full of absence. I just wanted to hear one voice that wasn't paid to be there. That evening, I finally scrolled through my phone. My hands trembled as I opened social media, and there it was, a photo of my children again. Same smiles. Same captions about cherishing family. Only this time, the location tag made my heart ache. Weekend getaway, Lake Tahoe. They were all together. My children, their spouses, my grandchildren, a perfect family portrait. Everyone except me. The doctors said my family was notified, but days passed, and no one came. I stared at the picture for a long time, tracing their faces with my finger. I wanted to feel anger, but what came instead was an empty kind of quiet, the kind that sits heavy on your chest until it becomes part of your breathing. For the first time in my life, I realized I had built a family that could live without me. And that truth, that cold, quiet truth, hurt more than the IV in my arm or the bruises on my body. If you've ever loved someone so deeply that you forgot to love yourself, then you know this silence. You know what it's like to wait for a call that never comes. And maybe you've told yourself, they'll change one day. But here's the hard truth sometimes. The people you love most will never look back until it's too late. If you're watching this right now, and you have someone who still calls you mom, dad, or even friend, cherish that connection while you can. Because one day, silence might be all that answers you. Don't scroll past this moment, hit that subscribe button now. Not just for stories like this, but to remind yourself that love, real love, should never be taken for granted. The nurse returned later that night, adjusting my blanket with quiet care. "Try to get some rest," she said softly. "Your body needs peace to heal." But peace was the one thing I couldn't find. I had rooms full of memories, children full of laughter, yet somehow I had become invisible to them. I used to believe love was something you earned. Now, I'm not so sure, because if love could be earned, I would have never ended up alone in that room. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. It was early afternoon when the nurse entered the room, her face caught somewhere between concern and hesitation. She was young, maybe in her late 20s, with kind eyes that always tried to find the right words when silence seemed easier. That day, though, she didn't meet my gaze right away. She stood near the end of my bed, her phone clutched tightly in her hand, thumb nervously tapping the edge of the screen. "Mrs. Parker," she began softly, "maybe you shouldn't see this." Her voice trembled slightly, the way people sound when they know the truth will hurt more than the lie. I frowned, confusion mixing with fatigue. "What is it?" I asked, my voice rough from days of disuse. She hesitated again, then finally turned the screen toward me. There it was. My daughter's smiling face filled the screen, perfectly lit, surrounded by her brothers and their spouses. They stood around a picnic table, laughing, sunlight dancing on their faces. The caption beneath it was only 5 words long, but it pierced deeper than any scalpel ever could. "Family day without the drama." I stared at it, frozen. My pulse quickened, the monitor beside me catching its rhythm. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. The room blurred as tears filled my eyes, but I blinked them away, unwilling to let the nurse see the full collapse happening inside me. I managed to whisper, almost to myself, "Drama?" My voice cracked on the word. I was dying, and to them, that was drama. The nurse bit her lip, lowering her gaze. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly, but I barely heard her. My mind was replaying every sacrifice. Every night I stayed up worrying, every call I made that went unanswered, every birthday card I sent that never got a reply. I had given these children my life, my health, my everything, and now I was nothing more than a punchline on their perfect family day. The phone slipped from my hand onto the blanket. I reached up, trembling, and pulled the oxygen mask away from my face, needing to feel something that wasn't filtered air and disappointment. The cold air stung my lungs, but I didn't care. For the first time, I let myself cry. Not quiet tears, but the kind that shake your shoulders, the kind you've been holding back for years because you thought being strong meant never breaking down. The nurse gently placed her hand over mine, wordless. It was the only human touch that didn't feel like pity. She whispered, "You should try to breathe, Mrs. Parker. Please." I nodded faintly, forcing the mask back on, taking in deep, shaky breaths. But inside, something had shifted, something final. I realized, in that single moment, that I had spent a lifetime chasing their love while ignoring my own worth. I was their safety net, always there when they fell, never noticed when they stood tall. But not anymore. That post, those smiling faces, it wasn't just betrayal. It was clarity. I turned away from the phone, staring at the window, at the world outside, cars moving, people living, life going on as if mine hadn't just fallen apart. The weight of realization sat heavy in my chest, heavier than the oxygen mask pressing against my face. I whispered to myself, so quietly even I barely heard it. If I survive this, I'll never beg for love again. That night was long, the longest of my life. The machines around me hummed softly, but my mind wouldn't rest. Every sound reminded me of what I had lost, or maybe what I had never really had: family. Such a small word, yet capable of breaking a heart in silence. I once thought dying alone would be the worst thing that could happen to me. I was wrong. Being forgotten by the people you love while you're still breathing, that's worse. If you're watching this right now and you still have your mother's number saved in your phone, call her. Don't wait until a stranger answers and says it's too late. Don't be the reason someone who raised you feels replaceable. Subscribe now, not just for stories like this, but as a promise that you'll never let silence take the place of love again. The nurse turned off the overhead lights before leaving. The room dimmed to soft shadows, and I stared into the dark, clutching the thin blanket like it was the only thing tethering me to the world. Somewhere deep inside, a decision was made: quiet, steady, irreversible. That night, I decided, if I survived, I'd never beg for love again. The days after that post moved slowly, as if time itself was afraid to touch me. The nurse still came in with her practiced smile, checking vitals and offering tea I rarely drank. The doctor stopped by once, talking about progress, about discharge, about getting stronger words that felt empty in a room that had seen too much silence. I didn't tell him that my heart wasn't healing. The monitors said I was stabilizing, but inside, I was hollow. I scrolled through my phone some nights, not to read messages, there were none, but to feel the illusion of connection, the glow of the screen soft against the dark. Each buzz that came from the phone startled me, though it was never from the people who should have cared. And then, one evening, something changed. It started with a faint vibration against the metal of the bedside table, short, urgent, followed by another and another. I turned my head, slow and uncertain, watching the phone light up again and again. I reached for it, my hands weak but trembling with confusion. The screen showed what I hadn't seen in weeks: missed calls. Not one, not five, but dozens stacked on top of each other. 27, 42, 50, 85. My breath caught. For a moment, I thought I was hallucinating. But then, before I could process it, another notification appeared, sharp and demanding, the kind that cuts through every noise in your mind. A text message. The words were short, almost commanding. "We need you. Answer immediately." I froze. The heart monitor picked up, beeping faster. My thumb hovered over the screen, tracing the familiar name: Evan. My son. The same son who hadn't called when I collapsed, who hadn't visited once since I'd been lying here, connected to machines that hummed in place of company. My throat tightened as I read the message again. "We need you." The irony of those 3 words sank in slowly, filling the room with a silence heavier than any noise. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than pain or sadness. It wasn't joy. It wasn't forgiveness. It was clarity, cold, clean, and final. The kind of clarity that comes when you realize the same people who left you for dead only come running when they need something from you. I turned the phone face down on the table, letting it buzz against the surface, its vibration echoing like a ghost of all the times I'd waited by that same device, hoping to hear their voices. I didn't answer. Not immediately. I watched the phone light up, again and again, until the screen went dark. It wasn't out of spite, it was peace. For once, they were the ones waiting. They were the ones wondering why I hadn't responded, what I was thinking, what I would say. For once, I had the silence and the power. After all those years of being available, of being the one they called at every crisis, they were finally the ones on the other end, desperate for my attention. And I realized, in that moment, that I didn't owe them my pain anymore, not even my words. The phone buzzed one more time before finally falling silent. I looked at it not with anger, but with an almost gentle detachment. Something in me had shifted completely. The woman who once cried over being forgotten had been replaced by someone who no longer needed to be remembered. They finally needed me, but I wasn't the same person anymore. The clock ticked softly in the background, marking the moment that everything changed. The old version of me, the woman who begged, who waited, who broke, ended that night. What remained was someone who understood that sometimes the greatest power you can hold is not in what you say, but in what you refuse to respond to. The next morning, the nurse came in as usual, chirping a quiet, "Good morning." She noticed the phone still face down and smiled gently. "Family reaching out?" she asked. I looked up at her, the faintest trace of a smile playing on my lips. "Something like that," I said. She nodded, unaware that those words carried the weight of an entire lifetime. Some messages don't need replies. Some silences speak loud enough on their own. The morning after the flood of missed calls, I woke to a strange calm. The sunlight cut through the blinds, painting pale stripes across my blanket, and for once, I didn't feel the heavy ache of loneliness. I knew they would call again, people like my children always did, once their need became urgent enough. Sure enough, just after noon, the phone began to buzz again, steady and insistent. I let it ring twice before answering, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted them to feel that hesitation. When I finally pressed accept, my daughter's voice filled the room, syrupy sweet and painfully familiar. "Mom, oh my God, we were so worried about you," she said, her tone bright and breathless. The kind of false panic that doesn't match the delay in her concern. For a second, I almost let myself believe her but then I remembered the post, the laughter, the word drama used to describe my life. I didn't answer right away. Silence stretched between us until she filled it, awkwardly. "We just heard from one of your coworkers," she continued. "They said you were in the hospital. Why didn't you tell us?" The irony almost made me laugh. "You didn't know?" I said finally, my voice even. "The hospital called all of you." There was a pause long enough for guilt to take root if it existed, but it didn't. Instead, she sighed dramatically. "We've just had so much going on, Mom. Work's been crazy, the kids had school stuff, and..." She trailed off, realizing how hollow it sounded. For the first time, I could hear the lie in her voice. There it was, that slight crack, that hesitation that only a mother would catch. The truth hidden under layers of performance. I had spent years mistaking manipulation for love, excuses for affection, but now I was listening differently. After a few pleasantries, she shifted the conversation. "Anyway," she said, her tone turning casual, "we wanted to check on you. Also, Dad's house, the one in your name," the lawyer said, "there's some paperwork that needs signing. Nothing serious, just something about transferring the title. We figured we could handle it while you're still, resting." The words landed like a slow echo. The house. My husband's house. The only thing left from the man who had built our life, brick by brick. The home where I raised all three of them, where they took their first steps, blew out birthday candles, cried over broken hearts. I felt the air leave my lungs in one long, controlled breath. So that's what the 85 missed calls were about. In that moment, everything clicked. The panic, the urgency, the sudden affection. It wasn't about me. It was about what was mine. I didn't let my tone change. "I see," I said calmly. "And what exactly do you need me to do?" Her voice brightened immediately. "Oh, nothing much, Mom. We just need your signature on some forms. We can bring them to you maybe later today." There it was again, the sudden sweetness, like perfume sprayed over something rotten. I had heard that tone before, in childhood apologies meant to get dessert after bad behavior. Only now, the stakes were much higher. "I'm still very weak," I said slowly. "But yes, you can come by." "Really?" she said, the relief in her voice too sharp to be genuine. "That's great, Mom. We'll bring the papers later. We've missed you." I ended the call before she could say more. My hand lingered on the phone for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling like dust in the air. The truth wasn't surprising, it was clarifying. They didn't miss me, they missed access. They didn't need me, they needed what I had. I used to believe that when people reached out, it was out of love. But now I understood that love, when it's real, doesn't come with conditions or legal documents. It doesn't arrive only when there's something to gain. The nurse came in shortly after, noticing the look on my face. "Everything okay?" she asked. I nodded faintly. "My family called," I said. She smiled. "That's good news." I smiled back, but there was no warmth behind it. "Yes," I said softly. "Good news." But deep inside, I was already planning something. Something quiet, measured, and final. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. I agreed to meet them, but not because I wanted to see their faces. I wanted to see their truth. The next day, the hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic, and the weak perfume of wilting flowers someone had left behind. I had barely slept, not out of anger, but out of clarity. I had spent the night replaying every conversation, every silence, every moment of my motherhood that had been taken for granted. I realized something painfully simple. I had raised adults who saw me as a resource, not a person. That morning, I asked the nurse, Grace, the kind one who always tucked my blanket neatly, to bring me my reading glasses and my handbag. She smiled warmly. "Planning to do some paperwork?" she asked. I smiled back faintly. "Something like that." When my children arrived, they came in a flurry of concern that didn't quite reach their eyes. My daughter was first, clutching a bouquet of supermarket flowers still wrapped in plastic. My two sons followed, one glancing at his phone, the other forcing a smile. "Mom," my daughter exclaimed, approaching my bed. "You look so much better." I gave a polite smile. "Better than what?" She faltered for half a second before laughing softly. "Oh, you know what I mean. We were just so worried." They spoke like strangers, rehearsing lines from a bad play. They gathered around my bed, filling the small room with false warmth. The youngest placed a stack of papers on the bedside table, his tone overly gentle. "Mom, we brought those forms I mentioned. It's just some legal stuff for the house. It'll make things easier for everyone, especially you." I reached for the papers slowly, my hands trembling slightly, not from weakness, but from control. "Of course," I murmured. "You've always been good at making things easier for yourselves." None of them caught the tone. They were too busy pretending to care. My daughter fussed with my blanket, my son adjusted the IV line as if he knew how, and all three of them kept exchanging nervous glances. They thought they were being subtle. They thought I was still the same soft, naive woman who had forgiven everything, the one who believed that family always meant love. But this time, I had prepared my own papers. Earlier that morning, I had asked Grace to contact the hospital's legal department. I had drawn up a separate set of documents, one that transferred the remainder of my savings, my shares, and a portion of my late husband's insurance payout into a new charitable foundation, the Parker Foundation for Nurses' Children. Every penny would go towards scholarships for the sons and daughters of caregivers like Grace, the ones who had shown me real compassion when my own bloodline had not. So when my children slid their documents toward me, I smiled softly, took a pen, and began to sign not their papers, but mine. My daughter clasped her hands together, exhaling dramatically. "Thank God, Mom. You have no idea how much this means to us." Oh, I knew exactly what it meant to them. And I knew what it would mean when they found out it wasn't theirs anymore. I nodded gently. "I trust you'll take care of everything," I said, my tone kind but hollow. She squeezed my hand. "Always, Mom. You can count on us." They stayed a little while longer, taking selfies by my bedside, posting captions like "family over everything." The hypocrisy was so thick, I could taste it. I smiled for the camera, not out of affection, but as a farewell to the role I had played for far too long. When they finally left, the room grew quiet again. The nurse returned, her eyes full of curiosity. "You okay, Mrs. Parker?" I handed her the signed foundation papers. "Could you make sure these get to the administrative office today?" I asked. "They're important." She looked at them, then at me. "You're setting up a charity?" "Yes," I said softly, "for people who remember kindness when others forget it." Grace's eyes watered slightly. "That's beautiful." I smiled faintly. "It's overdue." 3 days later, as I was being discharged, I received a text from my daughter. It was short, sharp, and stripped of all pretense. "Mom, what did you do? The accounts are empty." The lawyer said, "Everything's been moved." I stared at the message for a long time, then placed the phone face down on the bed. No reply, no explanation, no regret. They thought they fooled me, but I'd already closed every door. The house, the money, the inheritance, none of it was theirs anymore. I'd given everything to those who had shown me humanity. The rest, I left to their silence. For the first time in years, I felt peace, not the fragile kind that depends on others' approval, but the quiet, steady kind that comes from finally setting yourself free. The morning I was discharged, the sky outside the hospital window was pale and washed with sunlight, the kind that feels like a quiet promise. My legs trembled as I stood for the first time in weeks, but my heart felt lighter than it had in years. Sarah, the nurse who had stayed by my side through it all, was the one who helped me out of bed. Her hands were steady, her smile patient. She had seen me at my weakest, yet never once made me feel small. She was the same woman who had hesitated before showing me that Facebook post, the one that shattered what was left of my illusions. I remember her voice, gentle but firm. "Take your time, Mrs. Parker. We'll go slow." And we did. Step by step, down that long white hallway, my hand gripping her arm instead of the rails. I could hear the faint squeak of her shoes on the polished floor, and the soft hum of machines fading behind us. It felt symbolic, like I was walking away from the noise of my old life. The woman who showed me that cruel post became my family, I whispered to myself as we reached the exit doors. She sat with me on nights my real children forgot I existed. When the sunlight hit my face, I stopped for a moment. The breeze carried the scent of spring clean, alive, forgiving. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, feeling something new stir in me. Peace. I had no mansion waiting for me, no children waiting with open arms, but I had clarity, and that was enough. Over the next few weeks, I stayed in a small rented cottage near the coast. Sarah visited every few days, bringing me homemade soup, laughter, and company that didn't feel like an obligation. I learned how to enjoy quiet dinners again, how to wake up without waiting for a phone call that would never come. That's when I made the decision to expand the foundation. I met with local schools, hospitals, and community centers, places that cared for people the world often forgets. Every signature I gave, every check I signed, felt like stitching a new piece of my heart together. I donated part of my inheritance to build scholarships for children of caregivers, nurses, orderlies, single parents working 2 jobs. People like me, people like Sarah. One afternoon, as I sat at my kitchen table sorting through letters from grateful students, my phone began to ring again. It was a number I knew by heart. My daughter, then my sons, one after another. The voicemails came in fragments, apologies tangled with excuses. "Mom, please, we didn't mean it. We were just scared. Can we come see you?" I listened to each message once, then I pressed delete. My voice trembled slightly as I spoke to the empty room. "You taught me what family isn't. I'm finally learning what it is." There was no anger left, only truth. The kind that doesn't need to be shouted. Sarah stopped by later that evening. She brought a plant from my kitchen window, a tiny green sprout in a chipped clay pot. "For new beginnings," she said, smiling. I placed it near the sunlight and smiled back. That's exactly what this is. Days turned into weeks, and peace turned into strength. I started walking more, writing again, even volunteering at the hospital that once held my pain. The nurses there began calling me Mama Parker. I liked that. It was the kind of family I had always dreamed of, one built on kindness, not blood. Then one morning, a letter arrived, official, crisp, with my daughter's handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a single line. "Mom, we just found out about the foundation. Please tell us it isn't true." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer, beside my discharge papers and the photo Sarah took of me the day I left the hospital, smiling, free. And when they realized what I'd done, it was already too late. There comes a point in every storm when the thunder fades, and all you're left with is silence. For me, that silence wasn't empty, it was peaceful. After everything, I finally learned that sometimes silence is the loudest revenge. It doesn't scream, it doesn't beg, it simply lets time reveal the truth. I used to think closure came from confrontation, from hearing the words, "I'm sorry," but now I know it comes from walking away and realizing you no longer need those words. Every quiet morning I spent reading by the window, every cup of coffee enjoyed without waiting for my phone to ring, was a small act of healing. My peace became my protest. My happiness became my justice. I no longer scrolled through their photos, searching for myself in their lives. I stopped checking if they'd remembered my birthday or the holidays I once hosted. I stopped needing to be needed. For years, I believed family meant sacrifice without boundaries. But true love, real love, never demands your destruction. It nurtures. It grows with you. And when it doesn't, you must be brave enough to let go. That's not bitterness. That's survival. Sometimes, walking away is the only way to be heard. I learned that the hard way, lying in that hospital bed, waiting for people who never came. But I also learned that peace doesn't come from who stays, it comes from who you become when everyone leaves. Forgiveness doesn't mean letting them back in. It means freeing yourself from the weight of expecting them to be someone they never were. I forgave them, not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. The kind of peace that doesn't tremble when their names appear on my phone. I used to replay their laughter without me, wondering what I had done wrong. Now, I replay my own laughter, the genuine kind that echoes through quiet rooms and warm mornings. I used to cry over empty chairs. Now, I fill those chairs with people who choose me, people who ask how I'm doing and actually listen to the answer. Every scar they left became a lesson. Every heartbreak became an open door to something better. And maybe that's the strange beauty of loss, it teaches you what truly matters. I lost the family I gave everything to, only to find a family that asked for nothing in return. The nurses, the neighbors, the strangers who smiled at me in the grocery store. They became reminders that love isn't about obligation. It's about presence. It's about choosing, every day, to show up for someone. Before we dive deeper into this final moment, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Stories like these remind us that healing is possible, and your support keeps them alive. If you've ever been forgotten by those you gave everything to, stay till the end. What I found after the pain will change how you see your own story. The sun filtered softly through the hospital window where my journey had once begun. The same room that echoed with loneliness now held laughter, mine and Sarah's. We sat together, sipping tea, the light catching the small lines of time on our faces. She told me about her children, and I told her about the foundation, how many young nurses now had hope because of it. The same life that once felt empty was now full of purpose. And as we laughed, I realized something profound. I had spent so many years searching for family and people who didn't want to be found. But family had been right there all along, in kindness, in compassion, in the quiet moments where someone simply cared. Would you forgive your family if they abandoned you like this? Tell us in the comments. Because forgiveness looks different for everyone, and sometimes it's the only thing that sets you free. To anyone who's ever been forgotten by the people you gave everything to, you are not alone. You still matter. You are still worthy of love, even if it comes from new faces, new beginnings, or even from yourself. So, before you scroll away, ask yourself, have you been holding on to people who've already let you go? And if you have, maybe today is the day you stop waiting for them to see your worth. Maybe today is the day you choose peace over pain. Because sometimes, the greatest act of love is letting go. And sometimes, the greatest revenge is finally being happy.